the UPS deliveries of the dead. I don't normally complain when things go awry, but this was absolutely unacceptable. It all started last year just after Thanksgiving. We had just gotten the call that my brother was coming home for Christmas, and he is from out of state. So this was big news, and we needed to move up our Christmas by 2 weeks. Needless to say, my wife and I went online shopping the very next day, and we expected to receive quite a few packages over the next few weeks. At first everything seemed normal. I would come home from work and find a package or two on the porch. They would be gifts for the kids or for my brother and his wife. Then on a cloudy December morning we received the first large package. I was at my desk at work and got a text from my wife saying that we just received a large package and she will need my help to lift it inside. I sat there a little confused for a while. What could we have bought that was so heavy that she would need my help? My only thought was the PS5 bundle we bought my brother. But that wouldn't be enough to need my help. I arrived home at 5:03 p.m. and pulled into my driveway. There, laying half on the porch and half off the porch, was a large and long box. It was roughly 6 feet long and about 3 feet wide. I couldn't believe the size of the thing and thought to myself it must have been delivered to the wrong house. Instead, it had the correct address, name, and was sent certified mail by UPS. I scratched my head and just stared at it in disbelief. Then the thought came to me that I had to somehow get this thing inside. My wife and I discussed what this could be and thought it would be best to check the return label to get a clue. We looked in the upper left corner and it read, "United Hospital and Medical Disposal, redacted for legal reasons." What the hell? I asked out loud. My wife gave me a weird look and said that we shouldn't bring that inside. She added that we needed to call UPS and have them pick this up. I called that night and waited for almost an hour before I got a human being. Then this East Indian dude told me that it was delivered to the correct address. I repeatedly had to tell him that we were not expecting anything from a hospital, especially something the size of a human being. A human being? The thought rang inside my head and wouldn't let go. It haunted me and kept my mind racing with the worst thoughts imaginable. What if there was a body inside that box? No. It couldn't be. They wouldn't send a body to a random person. I decided to not tell my wife for fear that she would freak out and have us room at the Holiday Inn until the package was gone. For the time being, we decided to lift the package and place it in the shed next to our lawnmower. Our friendly UPS agent called us back the next evening to tell us that we would need to send the package back to the return address. We needed to drive it back to the nearest UPS store ourselves. Normally I wouldn't think much of it, but with something so huge and heavy, I didn't exactly want to lift that into the car. Not to mention I wasn't exactly sure we could even fit it inside the car. After a long day at the office, I was done and needed me some dad time. The following afternoon was my last day of the week and I had planned on taking the package to the UPS store on Saturday. I had just read an email from my GM when my wife called me. Not texted me, called me. I knew this was more serious and I needed to answer it immediately. I asked what was the matter and she was frantically telling me that 2 more large boxes had been delivered to our house from the same address. I told her to leave them outside and to lock the door. When I got home, I immediately noticed the 2 large boxes laying across the front porch and the front yard. Needless to say, I was pissed and wanted someone to come pick these up and stop all packages coming from this hospital. I parked my car and got out and was immediately struck with the most pungent and putrid stench I had ever smelled. It took everything I had to not lose my lunch into the bushes. I covered my nose with my shirt and managed to make it to the door. My wife barely stepped out when she too was hit with the wall of rotten flesh. She pulled me inside and closed the door so fast it sent change scattering all over the floor. "We need to call the cops." "Why? Why do you think?" I can't believe it took my wife slamming me into the door to come to my senses, but it finally clicked. Those were bodies. I called the cops and they came down to our house. We explained that we didn't order these packages and they seemed oddly shaped and weighted to that of a human. We had one of the officers open up one of the boxes and he nearly tossed his cookies when he lifted the lid. There in the box was a wooden coffin. Worse yet, it had the name and death date embossed on the front of it. The police had arrested us and put us in the police cars thinking we had somehow done this. But before they took us away, one of the other officers that joined the investigation managed to find a tag on the side of the coffin that read, "My brother was taken by the thing in the closet." I loved my brother. We would fight a lot and hurl insults at one another, but when push came to shove, we still loved each other. That's just how family is, isn't it? I didn't want to hurt him, I just wanted to scare him a little bit. Nothing big, but I know that what happened is my fault. It's my fault my brother disappeared. You have to understand that Jen and I never got along perfectly. I mean, we could stand each other at family dinners and holiday parties, but whenever we were alone together, it would always inevitably end in some sort of argument. I guess we just never had anything in common. He was always the more athletic and outgoing type, joining every sports team he could and spending long nights out with a rotation of girlfriends. I, on the other hand, was always more devoted to school and working my way towards the university of my dreams. We just never clicked, you know? So, when I got into my first choice university with a scholarship, I had no problem saying goodbye to him. Things were good, the first year went well and I was top of my classes. It wasn't until I heard Jeremy had gotten into the same university as I did with a rowing scholarship that things were spoiled. It was when our parents asked us to watch the house that I next saw him. I asked him why he chose my school, and he told me he wanted to live close by. He even had the audacity to congratulate himself on his sports scholarship as if it were equal to what I had earned. That night ended in an argument. It was as I was storming back to my room and saw the wardrobe in the hall that I thought of the perfect idea of how to get him back. Now, for context, my brother had always been petrified of the dark. It was something that had been in the background of our entire lives. Even now, he still went to bed with the lights in the room turned on. It was a real phobia of his. So, when I saw the old antique wardrobe at the end of the hallway, I had an idea of how to get him back. I had never seen the wardrobe before though, so I assumed my parents had bought it. It was a beautiful thing, perfectly carved with long and twisting patterns like that of a web. The brass handles of the doors curved like mandibles. Even though it looked like a beautiful antique, I couldn't see a mark on the exterior of the wood. It was only 3 hours later that I crept back to my brother's room, the light still shining at full blast despite it being long past midnight. I painstakingly opened the door, slowly to not make a single noise and wake up my brother. Then when I got inside, I carefully moved his mattress off his bed and dragged him down the hallway. Thinking about it now, he should have woken up while I was moving him. Try as I might, I wasn't good at being stealthy. Maybe it was the wardrobe that kept him asleep. While I was next to the wardrobe, I silently opened its doors, with the hinges not making a single squeak. Then, before my brother could react, I threw him into the dresser and locked the doors. At first, he was calm, not understanding what was happening, but as he came to realize his situation, he quickly began to pound on the door asking me to let him out. At this point though, it was nothing out of the ordinary. He told me it wasn't funny and that he was sorry, but he was just scared. Then he let out a yelp. He said something had touched him. I still didn't let him out. I had seen the inside of the wardrobe and knew that the only entrance was the doors I had locked, so I just assumed he was trying to convince me to let him out somehow. But after that, his scratching at the door became more frantic and aggressive. He kept saying how there was something else inside the dark wardrobe with him. By the end, he was practically throwing his entire body into the doors to try and break them open, but despite the wardrobe's apparent age, the doors held. Then just started to scream. I had never heard my brother make sounds like that before. Even on the rare movie night when we would watch a horror movie, he never screamed with so much fear and pain as I heard in those moments. This scared even me, so I decided to try and open the doors, but the lock had stuck. I assumed it was from my brother's violent attempts to escape. I told my brother it was going to be all right, that I was just going to open the door in a second, but right before I opened the door, I heard a crack. That doesn't accurately describe the last sound that came out of that awful thing though. It was a wick-crunching noise, like an egg being crushed in someone's hand suddenly. My brother's scream stopped, and the doors opened. My brother was gone. The inside of the wardrobe was now edged with scratches. Blood was in some of them that were later found to belong to my brother. Some of the scratches, though, looked too deep. Too much like teeth instead of fingernails. I just sat there for the next couple of days. When my parents came home from their small trip, I didn't know what to tell them. They immediately called the police and filed a missing person report, and I secretly hoped they would find something. That I had gone insane, but they didn't find him. My parents didn't remember buying the wardrobe either and threw it away after the police were done with it. I earnestly believed that I had undergone a mental break. That my brother had been kidnapped in the middle of the night. So that's what I chose to believe for a year. It wasn't until last night that I heard him again. I had been watching the house for a week as my parents went on another trip when I heard him. It was the middle of the night, and I was woken up by a scream. I genuinely thought it was a nightmare until I heard my brother pleading for help. As I looked out my bedroom door down the long hallway, I knew where the screaming was coming from. I should have gone down the hallway to open the doors to the wardrobe. Maybe I could have still saved my brother. But I doubt it. So I ran. I never wanted to hurt my brother, but I want to avoid the blame for what I did. And I'm scared that that dresser isn't satisfied with just one person. I sleep with the lights on now. I guess me and my brother share that frolic. So this is an old story, at least in my family. It's the kind of story that gets told when you're old enough, at Christmases and birthdays. I'll admit it feels pretty good to be told it. Once you reach the right age, it's like you've been let into some kind of big secret the rest of the family share in hushed tones. I won't claim it to be particularly scarier than anything you've heard before. There aren't any ghosts or demons or cosmic entities. But it frightened me to death the first time I was told it, and it has had the same effect on anyone I've ever seen it told to since. I suppose I should get to the point. My uncle, who isn't my uncle, nor my mom's dad's friend, I think he used to work in the 60s in one of those massive depot warehouses. The ones where they store boxes and random things before they can be shipped off to where they're actually meant to be. He was broke at the time and down on his luck, and he worked as the night security at this place. The depot was a couple of miles or so from his town, just off the freeway, and surrounded by dense woods. The site was huge, a compound of individual warehouses and storage rooms with a central car park. My uncle's office was tucked away in the corner of one of these warehouses, and he always made a point to emphasize just how cavernous this place was. The way he put it, when you walked through the warehouse at night, you couldn't even see the roof, just shelves and shelves of boxes stretching up into darkness. So every night my uncle had to arrive at 1:45, walk up and down every aisle of shelves in every warehouse, and then go to his office and wait out the rest of the shift. Keep his eyes and ears peeled for any disturbances. Simple job, easy money. Mind you, he wouldn't spend much time actually patrolling the place. He said he used to play himself at poker for most of the night. So on this particular night, my uncle pulls up in his truck to the car park, right on time, as always. He says it was a pretty clear night, with a big bright full moon. He remembers actually taking a moment and leaning on the side of the truck, staring up at the star-speckled sky. Out here, away from the city, you could actually see the stars properly. The air was crisp and clear. At the door to the warehouse he sees the guy he's meant to take over from, a guy called Vinny. Now, the way my uncle described Vinny, basically he was a nice enough guy, but not everything was working properly upstairs, if you catch my meaning. He was an older guy, had been working security there almost all his life, and was always coming out with these little oddities and sayings. Like, for instance, when it rained he used to say fish come a-walking, in some grumbling, muttering sort of way. And he used to say that the government was putting zinc into cornflakes. Anyway, just keep in mind that my uncle didn't really take much Vinny would say too seriously, okay? So my uncle walks up to Vinny, and he just says, "Hey, Vinny, good night," or whatever. And straight away he can see something's weird with Vinny, even more so than usual. Vinny's barely registered him. He's staring real intently at something far off, past the fence of the depot, near the tree line. "Everything all right, man?" asks my uncle. Vinny turns slowly and quietly says there's someone behind that tree out there. "You see him?" Peeking. My uncle turns to where Vinny's looking, but it's dark and the moonlight doesn't reach that far. "Look." He says peeking. Peeking at us. Vinny's words give my uncle some serious heebie-jeebies, so that he actually gets pissed off, like he's annoyed at the guy for scaring him right at the start of his night shift. He tells Vinny to knock it off, and Vinny's off anyway, shuffling over to his car. My uncle peers again at the trees, and still sees nothing, and he brushes Vinny off as either paranoid or senile, or both. He walks inside, through that cavernous warehouse, and he starts his patrol. There were 6 warehouses, and each warehouse had aisles A through to Z. I'm not going to do the math for you, but that's quite a lot of aisles to cover. My uncle goes through all of them, only his torch to light the way, but by now he's used to it. There's nothing amiss. He goes back to his little office, and he switches on the radio and he starts playing cards with himself. He spends a few uneventful hours like this. At about 3 in the morning, there's suddenly a deafening clang in the distance. My uncle jumps about a foot in the air, and he can tell the sounds come from the other side of the warehouse. It sounded like a heavy box, or even an entire shelf, had fallen over. Or been pushed is the thought he ignores. My uncle says he can remember the exact song which came on the radio at that moment, Tiptoe Through the Tulips, by Tiny Tim. Now if you know that song, then you know how fucking unbelievably creepy it is. My uncle probably would have chosen just about any other song in the world to play, at that second, in that lonely night. Despite, absolutely, categorically not wanting to step out of his safe little office, my uncle knows it is his job to go and check that sound out. As he steps out of the office, into the warehouse, he can hear that song trailing after him. Tiptoe, through the tulips. With me. The words follow him as he reluctantly makes his way down aisle A, where he finds nothing wrong. He moves left and turns up aisle B, where again nothing is out of place. He repeats this process, making his way up and down the aisles by flashlight light, looking for what caused that clanging noise. It's about this moment that Vinny's words from earlier in the night come back to him. Again, horrendous timing for my uncle. I'm guessing he was just about ready to shit a diamond. He gets to aisle T, and he points his flashlight down the end, and at first he thinks everything's fine in this aisle as well. Just as he's about to continue off, he sees something, way down at the other end of the aisle. There's a shape sticking out from behind the other end of the shelf. It's small, and sticking out from a few meters up in the air. He's not scared at first, just confused, because he can't tell what it is. His body recoils instinctively when it starts to move, but still, he can't tell what it is, only that it's moving subtly. He stares and stares at the shape, and then something clicks in his mind, like a jigsaw coming into place, and now he sees the full picture, and he doesn't like it, not one bit. It's an arm. It's an arm, and it's waving at him. He can't see the owner of this arm, he can just see it sticking horizontally from the end of the aisle. The rest of the body is obscured by the shelf. It's waving very slowly, moving up and down, in an exaggerated, almost cartoonish fashion. My uncle, in a moment which shocks himself too, calls out. Hey! Hey! Who's there? His voice cracks on the there, and he hopes that whoever this is hasn't heard the fear in him. The person doesn't reveal themselves, just slowly pulls their arm back behind the shelf, out of sight. My uncle immediately half walks, half runs down the aisle, to where the arm just was. But there's no sign of anyone there now. He hurries down past all the aisles in that direction, past parcels and packages, but he can't find this intruder anywhere. Now, the whole time as he's searching the aisles, he can hear noises from the aisles perpendicular to him, like, whatever aisle he's in, he can make out noises just past the shelves next to him, but he can't see what's making the noises, because it's obscured by the boxes and the darkness. He hears light, frantic footsteps, pitter-pattering on the floorboards adjacent to him, always just out of sight. At this point he's probably trying to pinch himself and wake up from this entire situation, because it sounds like there's somebody sprinting barefoot through this empty warehouse in the middle of the night. He gets back to aisle A, outside his office, and he can't hear any footsteps anymore, and he's starting to really freak out now, thinking he's let an intruder in and lost them. He turns to start searching the aisles again, and his flashlight beam hits something down the end of aisle, and now it's not an arm, it's a head. The face is peeking around the shelf, half obscured, to the extent he has to squint to make sure he's really seeing it. In the dark, and with the distance between them, he can only make out 3 features. The hair is too wild and matted for him to decide if it's a man or a woman. The skin is disgustingly pale. And he has a horrible suspicion that, as best he can see, this face is grinning at him. According to my uncle, he actually said the word nope under his breath before leaping into his office and locking the door. He pushed up his desk against the locked door and rushed over to the small landline phone in the corner of the office. He rang his boss, who wasn't too pleased to be awoken at 3 a.m., and then, on the instruction of his boss, called the police. My uncle says that while he's making these calls he begins to hear a light tapping and scratching on the office door, faint, coming in small bouts every so often. He described as not like someone trying to get in, just someone letting him know that they were there. The cops arrived and searched the depot and found nobody. Then more police were called. And more. The place was shut down for weeks. That's because of what they found in one of the large boxes, one which had fallen out of place into the middle of aisle Z. There was a small note, which read in neat cursive handwriting. I have no mouth, yet still I bite. I have no nose, but I can smell. I'll frolic when the moon is bright. You'll frolic with me, down in hell. Nestled alongside was a decomposing arm and a decapitated head. I can talk to trees. Yeah, I know it sounds strange, almost like some New Age talk, but that's what the title says. For as long as I can remember, I've always had a sort of special connection with nature. While other kids played on the streets, I preferred to spend my time among the trees, walking, climbing, and gradually listening to the trees. I remember when it first happened. I must have been around 10 years old when, as I entered the woods near my house, I heard a buzz coming from somewhere. That day I got scared and ran back home. Gradually, it became more common, to the point where I even talked to my parents about it, but that only led to visits to the psychiatrist, and I kept it as my own secret, mine and the trees. As time went on, I got better at communicating with them, getting to know their personalities. Did you know that pine trees have quite a foul mouth? They love to swear. And the sequoias are like grandmothers, always telling stories. But by far, my favorites were the oaks. They were the wisest and most patient, as if they carried centuries of knowledge in their twisted branches. It was on a windy autumn afternoon that I decided to visit my favorite oak, an imposing holm oak that stood in the heart of the woods. The feeling of unease hung in the air as I approached it. Its branches seemed heavier than usual. Hey, what's wrong? I asked, concerned. The tree responded with a rough sigh, its branches creaking as if protesting against the wind. I'm tired, son. My days in this world are numbered. I felt a tightness in my chest at its words. I had spent so many happy moments in its shade, and the idea of losing it was like losing a dear friend. Don't say that, I murmured, placing a hand on the rough trunk. You'll be okay. I promise. The tree gently swayed its branches in response. I appreciate your words, but this is the truth. My time is near. A feeling of helplessness washed over me as I watched the aged tree before me. But then, it did something unexpected. It extended one of its branches and offered me an acorn. This is my final gift to you, it said. The only fruit I managed to produce this autumn. Please, accept it as a symbol of our friendship over these years. I want to at least feed someone I love before I go. I looked at the large acorn in my hands, feeling a mixture of gratitude and sadness. I didn't want to lose my friend, but I knew I couldn't refuse its final gift. I accepted the fruit and carefully placed it in my mouth, crunching it between my teeth. It tasted bitter, as expected, but I didn't want to spoil the moment. As quickly as I ate, the tree withered, fell silent, and finally died. The entire forest, almost like a funeral procession, bowed, the wind hummed through the branches, and the sad rustle of the leaves made an almost deafening sound. I decided not to go to the forest for the next few days, to let things settle there. But that night, my sleep was disturbed by strange and unsettling nightmares. I saw images of twisted trees and sinister branches reaching towards me, as if pulling me into the earth. I woke up sweating, my heart pounding in my chest as I tried to catch my breath, a tingling sensation running through my body. What the hell is happening? I thought. Could it be a way to deal with grief? It was the first time I had seen a tree die, so maybe I was reacting differently because of that. I ignored it all and tried to go back to sleep. I woke up as soon as the sun touched my face, still tingling. I got up and got ready for work, getting stuck in traffic on the way. By the time I reached the office, the tingling sensation had turned into an intense itching. It was an allergy. I got to the office and went straight to talk to the HR people, telling them I wasn't feeling well. "Wow, Matthews, you should go home, you look pale, worn out. Are you okay?" "I don't know, I think I had an allergic reaction or something," I replied, trying to mask my concern with a weak smile. "If it continues like this, I'll go see a doctor. I hope it's nothing serious." The HR representative nodded in concern, offering me a day off to take care of my health. I thanked them, grabbed my things, and left, feeling increasingly uncomfortable as the itching intensified. I arrived home, not even bothering to properly park the car, jumping from the curb and running to the door already frantic. I stripped off my clothes and threw them away, rubbing my nails over the surface of my skin, which was now rough, bumpy, and sore due to the friction. I decided to try taking a bath before going to see a doctor, since in that state I wouldn't even be able to make it back to my car. I turned on the shower and started to fill the bathtub. The hot water seemed to temporarily calm the itching, instantly relieving me. My wounds began to swell down, but this revealed a deplorable state of my skin. It was now horribly textured, full of veins and deep, scaly marks. A shiver ran down my spine as I touched these protrusions with trembling fingers. They weren't just stretch marks, they seemed to be growing, stretching slowly. I tried to contain the panic as I sank into the water, hoping maybe this was just some strange side effect. But as the water began to cool around me, the changes in my body only seemed to worsen. I felt an uncomfortable pressure in my stomach, as if something was moving under my skin, inside. The pain began to concentrate on a smaller and smaller spot, and as it lessened, the pressure became greater and more painful. I got from the bathtub, but didn't get far, nor did I put my foot out. I fell from pain, putting my hand over my belly. I was going mad. It was unbearable, until a tearing sound echoed in the bathroom walls. I looked down, and there was blood in my hand, dripping. I directed my gaze to where I was holding before and felt terror consuming me. I couldn't process it. I stood up trembling in shock and pain as I wondered what was happening to me. Where there was once my navel, now a large wooden branch extended, piercing and tearing my skin. That root continued to extend, breaking my skin, as if searching for something. Every movement was torture, every snap accompanied by a stabbing pain that seemed to pierce my soul. I wanted to scream for help, run away from this nightmare, but my limbs seemed frozen in place, unable to respond to my command due to growing fear. And then, just when I thought it couldn't get any worse, a familiar voice whispered in my mind, soft and seductive like the rustle of leaves in the wind. "Accept," murmured the voice, echoing through the walls of my skull. "Accept the change." I lifted my face, looking at the mirror in absolute horror. It was there, along with my reflection. The energy of that ancient tree. I saw it, in the open space between those branches and my flesh. It was taking over me, like a parasite. It wasn't just a fruit it had offered me, it was its seed. My body trembled with terror as I stared at the image in the mirror, increasingly protruding from my belly. The root that extended from my stomach now twisted and stretched, as if seeking something. It tried to return to the bathtub, to fix in the water, I suppose, but I grabbed it tightly, pulling it back into me with even greater pain. The now coagulated and thick blood took on slightly greenish tones as I contained the monstrosity. With agonizing effort, I finally managed to break the paralyzing fear that held my limbs, and stumbled out of the bathroom, ignoring the stabbing pain that ran through my body. My mind was clouded with panic as I descended the stairs. I struggled into the garage and grabbed something that was there, an axe. I know it's kind of bizarre to have one of these when you talk to trees, but I used it to chop wood that the plant sometimes gave me. It was the only thing I knew that could help me now. With the instrument in hand, I let out a scream, raised the axe, and struck a precise blow to the root. The impact was like an explosion of pain, jumping to my brain, but I ignored it, focusing all my strength on the next blow. Once, twice, 3 times I struck, until finally the root broke, spurting blood and viscous fluids onto the bare floor. I fell to my knees, exhausted, catching my breath as nerve impulses were still being processed by my brain. I got up with difficulty, using the handle as a kind of cane, and saw my car parked on the sidewalk, the garage door open. I was naked, but so what? That wasn't the biggest of problems. I walked slowly to the exit, but as soon as I stepped on the grass outside, a wave of excruciating pain ran through my leg. I looked down and saw roots extending, tearing through the chest and soles of my feet, merging with the grass as if seeking nourishment. Damn it! I shouted. My heart pounded in my chest as I fought against the sensation of panic threatening to overwhelm me. I don't know where I got strength from, but I needed to act fast before it was too late. Now, not only my belly, but up to my knee, my skin was already indistinguishable from wood, rigid and dry. I raised the axe and began to cut it, with no choice. I almost passed out 3 times until I finally managed to break it, falling back. Looking at the stump that was on my leg, and the piece that was left on the lawn, my horror was even greater. Pure wood, just wood. Nothing human. Tears of despair began to form as I accepted that I wouldn't be able to leave the house. I crawled down the stairs and now I'm here, typing this in front of the computer. My body is almost unrecognizable, deformed by grotesque changes. My skin has become cellulose, my eyes are getting blurrier, and as I try to call for emergency, my voice has been replaced by a vegetal noise, a woody creak. I know I don't have much time before I'm completely consumed by this transformation, and the voice of the old tree whispers incessantly in my mind, echoing like a hypnotic mantra, which doesn't help at all. I knew how to talk to trees, and I genuinely hope that someone can talk to me too, when nature finally consumes my whole being. I think my future self is pulling pranks on me. I think I'll just jump right into the beginning. Back in high school, I used to be a total stoner. Every day after school, I'd walk home or get a ride from my friend, whom I'll call Tom. One Friday, he picked me up to cruise around our small town and smoke. As we are nearing the end of the day, we empty our silicone skull-printed bong, throw it in his backpack, and he takes me home. The next morning, he picks me up, and as I grab the same bong from the same bag, I notice that the downstem is missing. Very odd. We don't even take it out when we empty the bong, but whatever we think to ourselves, then check every place it could be. We pillage the entire car like police pulling over Cheech and Chong, scavenge every trash can we stopped at that night, and rake through half the parking lot we smoke at. Absolutely nowhere in sight. Blue and defeated, we made up a story that our future selves pulled a prank on us and went back in time just to steal something so minuscule but so crucial in our daily routine that we would without fail notice. So we got a new bong and continued on as normal. We just needed a story to feel better about ourselves and to laugh it off easier. As time went on, more unusual things started to happen. Occasionally, I would drink. Nothing too serious, only getting drunk a small handful of times. But one time I was lying in bed, a few shots deep, about to go to bed. I placed my Xbox controller on the side of my bed, turned on YouTube, and drifted off to sleep. I wake up to find my controller misplaced next to the TV. As if someone else haphazardly put it back in the wrong place after they had taken a few minutes to recollect on a game from their past. But that's not enough evidence to sway anyone's opinion. Things like this only seemed to happen while I was intoxicated in one way or another. Like when I got surgery, I'll spare you the details. All you need to know is that the doctors had me loopy. I got a ride home from my partner, and they laid me in our bed. The last thing I see is them closing the door to go to work as my eyelids begin to fall. Suddenly, I heard the slam of a door as I was shot awake. I scanned my surroundings, and nothing was out of the ordinary until I noticed that my tapestry was sprawled upside down on the south wall of my room. Still in a daze, I couldn't figure out why. I thought it was my partner, but they were still going to be at work for another 2 hours. The meds led me back to sleep, and when I woke up, of course, the tapestry was corrected in its place as my partner opened the door. Everything so far could be dismissed with the simple explanation that I was drunk, high, or made a fool by the people close to me. But yesterday, nobody can convince me it wasn't something extraordinary. Recently, I began going on runs on my days off. Nothing crazy, just a short jog around my small town while my partner was at work. Yesterday, I decided to leave my phone at home, get away from technology, and enjoy nature. I grabbed my keys, locked the front door, and started jogging. It couldn't have been more than 25 minutes until I returned home. I put the key into the doorknob, and my heart drops as I feel no resistance when I turn. It was already unlocked. I swung the door open to check for intruders or missing furniture, but nothing seemed to be touched. I was at war with the idea that I left the door unlocked. I never leave the door unlocked. Thanking God that I was the first to realize the only thing between an intruder and all of my possessions and life savings was an unlocked door, I threw together a fruit salad to further my healthy life changes. After taking a few small bites, I sit down on the couch and turn on my Xbox. As the loading screen plays its animation, I take another look around the room. I relished in the luck I possessed to have done something so hazardous with no repercussions. The animation finishes, and a screen I haven't seen in a very long time takes its place. Preparing console haunts my vision. My Xbox has been factory reset, everything on it is gone. How could this happen? I quickly sped through the first few screens that a new Xbox requires a new user to go through. Then I attempt to sign into my account to recover my data, and a prompt is shown. No email found. I didn't understand. I thought I entered the email correctly. I reached out for my phone on the coffee table, and as I lifted it up, I was shown a similar screen. On my iPhone, which I have had for years now, a white screen with black text greets me hello. How have my Xbox and phone reset themselves? Nobody knows the passwords that are required to do such a thing. I ran to my laptop, same story. I checked my Switch, same story. Even my Kindle Fire, same outrageous story. Then I noticed the time on my oven was off, as was the time on the microwave. I didn't understand how any of this was possible, but just as I was thinking of any possible explanation, the front door opened again, this time with a lot more force than a why is my door unlocked, but more of an outraged where the fuck is my boyfriend? My partner turns to look at me, tears running down their face, eyebrows furrowed, mouth being pulled to the earth by each end with the largest frown I had ever seen on their face. I walked towards them, trying to understand what was going on, but before I got a word out, I felt a rough greeting from a hand spread across my cheek. They began to yell about the nasty things I said to them, the names I called them, and how I described them. Nothing made sense. They showed me their phone with their texts. Miles long of harsh words, unlike either of us to be sharing, but oddly written out exactly how I type. Not a single detail is missing. I tried to explain myself, but nothing was working. I don't blame them for not believing me, though I was jogging was not the answer they were looking for. For my own sake, I'm going to leave out the rest of the details of my 3-year relationship being pulled from under me. I'm now at a hotel, with most of my belongings in boxes filling each seat of my car. I don't know what to do. Nobody could have possibly done what happened yesterday. Nobody knows where I keep my spare key or the passwords to my phone or accounts. I don't even have enough friends to suspect anyone of being able to replicate the way I text. Nobody but me. If anybody has any questions or suggestions as to what I should do, I would greatly appreciate the conversation. I have never felt so alone. I'm scared of what I might do next.